the lipstick effect. During times of financial stress, consumers are willing to buy less costly luxury goods to still get that hit of dopamine and excitement, but obviously protect the bank account. Duh, the biggest duh of all time. Little treat culture started small, but it has snowballed and I think has affected every industry and every vertical in really interesting and surprising ways. When businesses come to a performance marketing agency, they're looking to increase their conversions. Knowing about these theories and these moments in culture, they help us formulate the best strategies to forge a path to more conversions. I love working with Pilot House because while we are a performance marketing agency, we really pride ourselves on caring so much about brand and creative. At Pilot House, we don't just make ads, we craft them. Every edit, every word, every scroll-stopping detail is built with purpose and care, and I truly believe that care drives creativity and creativity drives results. Our attention to both scale and brand allows us to craft strategies that deliver you short-term results while making you long-term successful, which is so important for any DTC brand. If you are curious about learning more about working with Pilot House, you can fill out a lead form at pilothouse.co and let them know you want to go on a brand new ad venture. You don't actually have to say that. You don't have to make a pun. I'm not going to force you to make a pun. Just fill out the lead form. We'd love to chat with you. Hi, welcome back to Ad-venturous, the podcast produced by DTC and hosted by me, Aves. Today, I wanted to start with some just very general philosophical advice, which is that life is cyclical. And I think that the sooner you understand that, the happier you're going to be throughout your entire life. I think that impermanence is actually one of the greatest gifts that we could receive, and trying to fight it is just ultimately going to distract you from enjoying the moment. It takes life experience to learn this more than anything, which is really annoying, but I do believe it's just the truth. Things go up, things go down, life is life. That is how it works. I think it's particularly important to remember that things go up, things go down, life is life when we start chatting about the economy. Today, I wanted to specifically talk about one of the buzzier quote-unquote recession indicators that people like to talk about, but I think that sometimes talking about recession indicators or different theories around what's going on with the economy sometimes makes people, especially in the private sector, especially business owners, makes us a little bit jumpy. So again, I think it's just important to frame the conversation and the thoughts that hopefully this episode inspires around the idea that, life and the economy, both very cyclical. Things go up, things go down. The true secret to success that I have seen is adaptability, hands down. So again, that impermanence and seeing it as a joy and a gift is just going to empower you to be agile in different, exciting ways. So like I said, I want to talk about one of the buzzier, quote-unquote, recession indicators in the game right now, which is the lipstick effect. And I also wanted to dive into how we can leverage these sort of economic theories and buzzwords to sustain long-term success for the brands that we work with or run, because I do think there's some validity to some of these theories, but ultimately, again, things go up, things go down. It's all about how you ride the wave. So to sort of frame the conversation, I wanted to point out that when everything is a recession indicator, nothing is a recession indicator. There's a real shortage right now in critical thinking and research, and unfortunately a major overage in people posting their thoughts on the internet. So I thought it'd be really good to level set and be real here for a moment. This obsession with labeling things and cultural behaviors as recession indicators is kind of annoying, and it incites panic that doesn't really need to exist, in my opinion. I think to truly make a call around whether or not something is indicative of a recession, you first have to fundamentally understand what a recession is and what symptoms it drives culturally, and through those cultural symptoms, how does it affect consumerism? It's just sort of like Econ 101, but you shouldn't just be coming onto the internet with hot takes of something that you've seen your friends doing, saying that that is a recession indicator, because usually it's not. Being able to connect culture and the economy is a very delicate and oftentimes inaccurate art. So today I wanted to just cut through and run through a generally helpful theory, which is the lipstick effect, like I mentioned, and how it's reflected in sort of little treat culture that's really running rampant in society today. To start really simply and breaking down the lipstick effect, the lipstick effect is a really cute and catchy nickname for a proven hypothesis around how consumers spend when faced with economic crises or downturn, to be less alarmist. The idea is that during times of financial stress, consumers are willing to buy less costly luxury goods to still get that hit of dopamine and excitement, but obviously protect the bank account, which is like, yeah, duh, the biggest duh of all time. Most, I find, economic theories that turn out to be correct and are proven with research do turn out to be kind of like, yeah, duh, but we want to prove these things out with research and stats, obviously. But I also do think that things that feel really easy to predict and like common sense are actually very interesting and telling. And like I said, doing the work to actually prove them out, very important. We love. The assumption here is to explain this behavior very clearly, that people opt to buy higher end versions of smaller purchases that they would be making anyway during these economic downtimes because, again, they simply can't be making those bigger purchases. And again, duh, it makes a lot of sense. I'm just going through it just in case you're unfamiliar with the lipstick effect in general. I think there's also some interesting and sort of almost anecdotal evidence, especially from different decades and times, that point out some potential correlation to lipstick sales rising in economic downturns while dress sales actually plummet. This is obviously limited in scope. Lipsticks and dresses are for primarily women, and this whole theory feels a bit like almost Mad Men-esque, to be honest. It's a little bit antiquated and culturally almost irrelevant, in my opinion. It's a great meter, I think, for economic strength during like the Great Depression and also the early to mid-late 2000s, really helpful to contextualize what was going on then. I think that women's appearances were a much more controlled commodity compared to where we're at in the year 2025. I feel similarly when folks discuss sort of things like the hemline theory or index as well, which is this idea that women's skirt hemlines rise and fall like stocks depending on the economy. I think it's interesting. I think there's merit to it, but I also think that we have really modernized, and that's important to note when we do look to these theories to prove out where are we in the economy, what do we need to be doing as a business to protect ourselves. I think it's great to take it all with a grain of salt. And again, remember that things are different and people spend their money differently because it's been like 100 years since the Great Depression and like 20 years since the late 2000s. Just scary to think about. Makes me feel old. But I do think that a lot of these theories, which centralize themselves around the appearance of women and how women shop, are just plain outdated. There's also a theory that suggests some similar cultural and economic correlation through indexing the purchasing behavior around men's underwear, which I do think is a little bit gross to imagine men like going without fresh underwear, but who knows? Times are tough sometimes, no judgment. But yeah, in like 100 years or something, I'm sure some girl with a podcast is going to be yapping about like the tooth gem theory or something and analyzing our behavior right now and how much tooth gems are popping up. You know what I mean? Like things are so contextual, so it's good to keep that in mind. So how are these culture-focused economic theories relevant to how we produce and create advertising materials? Where this all gets very interesting, in my opinion, is the semi-recent introduction of little treat culture into our society. Consumerism has, in a lot of ways, really gotten away from us. Someone recently put a Labubu on the grave of Karl Marx, which is like objectively a crazy thing to do. It's so nuts beyond belief, but I think it's a great quick capture of where we are and where consumerism is as a whole. We're just in this timeline. We got to deal with it. We're sticking to it. So what is little treat culture? I think most sociologists and economists are still working on coming to terms with what this shift in consumer behavior could signal and what it means for us as a whole. I don't think anyone has a definitive definition of little treat culture, and I also don't think that we have a definitive understanding of where it will take us. But I do think it's a direct response, in my opinion, to our new level of accessibility to wealth. What I mean by that is that social media has fundamentally shifted the way we all interact with one another. It's given us glimpses into lifestyles that otherwise would have been completely inaccessible to us previously. I think of those creators who are quite forward about the amount of wealth that they hold or hoard, if we're honoring Karl Marx on this podcast, which we do. But I think that the way that social media works now, it really gives us a glimpse into what their everyday lives are like. And it allows us to really live a day in their life, in their shoes, which again, we never truly had access to before like we do now. Part of our fascination with this type of content is a bit of keeping up with the Joneses, which we did discuss on a previous episode. I believe that was on the baby boomer themed episode. So we're talking about keeping up with the Joneses, which is a concept that you're trying to get what your neighbors have, that you're always in this state of need. You're never satisfied because you're always trying to, outcompete the next door neighbor. They get a new grill, you get a better grill, they get a better grill. We're one-upping each other. It goes back and forth. But what is so interesting about the times that we live in now is that the Joneses are no longer our neighbors. And if you think about it, our neighbors are going to be in the same socioeconomic situation that we are. We can both afford houses in the same area. We have similar lifestyles. So the things that they are purchasing, the behaviors that they are modeling, are going to be very attainable for us. But now the Joneses are sometimes billionaires that are no longer our neighbors. They're just people we see every day on our phones, but they are so incredibly far removed from our actual community and from people who, again, are in similar socioeconomic stations as us. So there's this weird new tension between our aspirations and our realities, and the only accessible solution has been to water down these elements we see out in the wild, on our feeds, and create experiences that feel similar. But the fact of the matter is, these are not the same experiences that these people are having. We are not keeping up with the Joneses just because of the way that society works. It's just capitalism 101. We're not going to ever get there. So it's almost moot to try. And that, I think, has given way to little treat culture because we have started to try our hardest to really water those things down. Where again, before, it felt a lot more inaccessible. But now we want to create the same type of content that these people are creating as well because it does better. If you think about it, of course, people are going to watch and engage with a video of someone who, say, just travels around on a yacht all year long because that is interesting and it's really far away from most of our shared experiences, and we want to interact with it. We want to engage with it. So it also makes sense that when people want to chase that same engagement on socials, they're going to try to exhibit the same behaviors as the people who do it, which again are typically people with a ton of wealth and a ton of privilege. Little treat culture started small. I think of like the Parks and Rec joke, treat yourself. It started small, but it has snowballed and I think has affected every industry and every vertical in really interesting and surprising ways that come through a lot in the way that businesses develop products. So a great example of this is Erewhon might be too expensive for your weekly grocery shop. So you can't fully emulate what those online creators are doing. But now you can grab a highly postable smoothie because Erewhon, just in case you didn't know, they have these like collab smoothies all the time. They're highly shareable and they work really well again to bring in people who might not be able to access shopping at Erewhon every week for their basic groceries, but they can go in and get that smoothie. So it gives them that little hit and that feeling like they are part of that community that they're witnessing that is, again, just kind of out of their reach. Why am I bringing all this up? It's not to make you feel bad or to make you feel like you can't ever live like those influencers that you see every day. But I think it's just important, again, to contextualize why things might be happening. And I think that our relationship with people and influencers online have really driven a lot of this little treat culture. I think that sometimes in the past few years, we have specifically misdiagnosed symptoms of the lipstick effect with the sort of new reality of little treat culture. I think it's been very easy for people to look at trending lip products specifically. So whether that's like the Laneige lip mask or Summer Fridays lip gloss, which I am wearing right now, I do think that those things fall more into the category of little treat culture than they actually do making up the lipstick effect, which makes it very interesting, again, like I said, to draw those parallel lines between culture and the economy. Things get really muddy when other shifts in culture start happening, like little treat culture. So for the record, I do believe little treat culture is most likely here to stay for a substantial amount of time, probably like 10, 15 years. We're still going to be riding this high of little treat culture. It's a huge pillar in Gen Z's consumerism and their habits in purchasing, as well as millennials. I think that this idea that everything is so awful, so I'm going to buy myself a little treat just for getting through the work week, is very Gen Z coded. And it is a cultural trend that I think we haven't seen the peak of. We're still seeing the rise. We haven't hit quite peak little treat culture yet. When we get there, I'll let you know, but I don't think we are quite there yet. So again, why bring this up? How is all this economic theory and cultural critique relevant to us as advertisers and brand operators? Well, over here at Pilot House, we are a performance marketing agency, and performance in the world of e-commerce means one thing, and that is to convert traffic. Sometimes leads, which we are very good at lead generation, but broadly speaking, a lot of the times when businesses come to a performance marketing agency, they're looking to increase their conversions. And knowing about these theories and these moments in culture, they help us formulate the best strategies to forge a path to more conversions. I've seen this time and time again where a brand comes in with a hyper-specific way of thinking of their product and in turn their customer journey. A very common mistake I see more complex vendors. Complex vendor here I'm defining by brands with sort of multiple SKUs and varying segment considerations. I think one of their most common mistakes is that they try to sell the cart before the horse. And anyone who's ever been on an audit with me or anyone who works with me knows that I often do mix up this saying. But here's how I think about the cart and the horse thing, is that if you sell the cart first, you can't go anywhere with only the cart. You need to sell the horse first because that'll get you somewhere. You can strap all of your stuff onto your back and you will carry less than you could if you had the cart and the horse, but you're still carrying something, and that is really valid. Hopefully I didn't lose you in my butchering of the cart and horse idiom. That's just how I think about it. There's still action happening if you sell someone on just the horse, and just the horse is a win, in my opinion. So the question is, what is your horse? Acquisition is sometimes something that's a little bit more complex than we actually think it is, because that first purchase is dependent on a lot of things, both your ability to market your brand, your product choice that you choose to put in front of people first. It might not make sense, depending on your catalog, to stake success on selling someone on your top performing product as their intro into the brand. So how can you little treatify your customer acquisition journey? To me, I think a successful creative strategy, it needs to outline three things. Number one, who are we talking to? So who are we talking to just means who are our target personas? Who's the ICP? How are we going to go about segmentation? Number two is how are we talking to them, which is media mix, creative styles, sort of the language we're using through the choices we make in the creative expression of the strategy. And number three, what are we selling them? And this comes down to understanding the tiers of your product. By thinking of your acquisition efforts through this lens, you can sort of help to shore up your creative strategy and subsequent customer journeys through a lens that's going to protect your growth against varying market conditions. So how do you figure out what you're selling them? How do you find your perfect acquisition product? It's a really fine art and balancing act, I will say, because you don't want it to be too much of a little treat. We are paying money to acquire these customers. So sometimes a acquisition product in your mind might be like a very small tester of something. But if you think about it, you're sort of going to price yourself out of a successful NCAC because you're using a product that just doesn't cost enough to justify your cost of acquisition. So you really, again, want to walk a very delicate line between a price point that feels really approachable to people, but also a product that invites them into your world. I do find that the brands where this sort of strategy work the best are the ones, like I said, complex. We've got a lot of different SKUs. We've got different ways of thinking of our personas and segmentation. But I also think brands who really have built a world and experience for users do tend to see more success by thinking about their products through tiers like this. Again, because the assumption is you bring someone in on a tier 1 product aimed at acquisition, they're eventually going to fall into line and purchase the other things. They're becoming part of the world. I think a good example of this is from my own personal shopping habits. It's also sort of beauty related, which is why I wanted to use it. But I thought I'd sort of frame the rest of this conversation through a brand called Diptyque, which I personally love. They're sort of a fragrance and home brand based out of France. Diptyque was started at the turn of the 60s by 3 artists in Paris. I honestly should have been there. That sounds very up my alley. And it's probably, in a way, why I gravitated towards that brand. It's just infused with something that really speaks to me, which is, yeah, artists in the 60s were probably like smoking and eating really good food. And I wish that was me. It was, yeah, like I said, founded by 3 artists. They were really excited and optimistic about the trajectory of the world and culture at the time. And they really craved modernity and a shift in the sort of vertical that they were entering. They brought a really new lens to the scented candle market, something that had previously been purely practical in nature. They treated the creation of their scents and candles like they treated other artistic mediums, which again, I think is why I'm very pulled into the brand. But about 5 years after they started developing their candles, they started developing scents as well. They developed their first eau de toilette, which we love. And to this day, the way that Diptyque creates is really anchored in that idea of artistic freedom. They maintain a really close tie when they're putting together a new product with illustrators and artists, which I think is really, really cool. And yes, they're definitely on the sort of luxury price point side of things, I guess. Their products are not like cheap in any way, shape, or form. So again, I think they were really interesting sort of mini case study for us to think about this like little treat culture meets lipstick effect meet tiered products for different customers at different stages of awareness. Really good example of all that. They now sell sort of bath and body care as well, and they sell home goods too, like I mentioned, that are all sort of anchored around their core product line. So those things all kind of fall into a very similar category, which is why I do think, again, they're an interesting mini case study for this. I probably looked at this brand for like a year maybe before making a purchase, which I do think is really interesting because it's sort of an outlier in my typical, maybe impulsive shopping behavior, to say the least. But yeah, I do think what's really interesting about my own personal experience with Diptyque is that I had a lot of choice paralysis. Even though this is a vertical where I shop and spend a lot of money, and I'd seen a lot of things that made me really interested to test their products, I was sort of stuck in the zone of choice paralysis because I didn't know what a good entry product would be for me. I saw a lot of positive feedback about their scents, but I also didn't live close enough to a boutique to really sample anything. I thought about buying a candle, but I'm weirdly more particular when I'm buying candles than I am about buying scents that I'm going to wear, which doesn't really make any sense to me logically, but that's how I shop. And their home goods are all really centered around their products, specifically their home fragrance. So it didn't make any sense for me to buy like a vase or a candle holder to hold a candle from this brand that I had not yet purchased. So yeah, I probably thought about it for like a year or so. And then eventually I got an email around a very giftable sample box that they'd put out around the holidays. This was like maybe 2 years ago, and it just contained some of their more popular scents. Now, do not use this as an exact, like, I'm going to go make a little sample bundle and that's my tier 1 product, because typically bundles are a really bad tier 1 product if you think about it. Like I said, to make that first purchase, to get that NCAC down to where we want it to be, you need to have a certain amount of trust, social proof, and excitement about the brand. So bundles, often when we're putting together multiple products, they're asking a user to do more. Instead of just selling me on one scent, they're selling me on multiple, which in this instance is a little bit different. If you think about maybe like clothing, who's bundling clothes? I don't know. That's a bad example. But if you do think about clothing,
there's a lot more trust and there's a lot more sort of dynamic moving pieces. So bundles are a no-no. If we're also just bundling multiples of the same product, that's a no-no for a tier 1 product. Even if you have pretty good sort of savings involved with it, that's going to be much more suited for people down the funnel. Tier 1, acquisition, net new customer, bundles, not usually the way to go. This one example, they were. It just made sense for Diptyque, again, as a sort of like scent-based purchase, to have options and to be able to explore and play. And I remember very specifically when I got this in the mail, like I said, it was about 2 years ago. It is like I said, a more luxury brand. It's a bit higher end. So I remember that the experience of like opening the box and seeing how it was all packed away and the tissue paper used, it was all really nice and really wonderful. And like I mentioned before, it brought me into the world that Diptyque has been building for years now. It did it really flawlessly. It was a little treat. The price tag is a little bit different than if we're thinking about contextualizing little treats through like a croissant at the bakery, but it still fell into that category of, I remember very distinctly, again, it was like around the holidays 2 years ago. I'd had a really wild Q4 and I was like, I should get this. It's a nice little treat. It's landed in my inbox. It's perfect. I just have to click through and make the payment. Easy peasy. After I got that sample box, I was fully into the brand. I got into the candles and the accessories. I started gifting Diptyque to friends and family. I'm fully in the ecosystem now, and I'm happy to live in this branded world that they've built. And I am telling you this because I know this of myself. If I had been served an ad around this set of smaller containers of their fragrances sooner, I definitely would have bought it sooner. It wouldn't have taken me a year to get there. So for the record, I don't have any of my own personal social media accounts, so I'm not hating on Diptyque in any way, shape, or form. They actually might serve these products as like tier 1 acquisition-based products and campaigns. I don't know. I'm not on the platform in a personal way, so who knows? But I did want to illustrate it just in how important it is to find those tier 1 products, like I mentioned. It should be really simple for someone to, again, make that jump. It should have everything sort of about your brand, which, again, this purchase really did. Like I mentioned, the packaging was really beautiful. There's like great notes or like sort of a little bag to put my sample fragrances in. It brought me into the world in a really efficient way. And now, like I said, I'm very happy bobbing around in the world of Diptyque and living there. So finding your tier 1 acquisition products can be simple and intuitive, but I do think it takes a lot of testing to actually get there and do it successfully. Because once you find that tier 1 product, guess what? I typically tier things out by like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. What are the giftable products after that? Like I really mark with the clients that I work with what products people are buying at different parts of their journey. And this is not by any means an exact science, but once you have an idea of how people are doing this, then you can again start to organize your campaigns and your efforts around it, which is only going to make you more efficient. So not everyone's going to go through the same exact journey within a segment or persona, but once you really understand where each product sits with each persona, it just, like I said, it becomes a lot more efficient. All of your efforts become a lot easier and higher confidence. At Pilot House, we're sort of always measuring the cost and effectiveness of our actions, which is why we've really started thinking more about product in this way, because it really helps prove out our own strategies and make sure that we are doing the right work at the right time. So we've worked with brands who've ended up completely like pivoting their top of funnel strategy, to be honest with you, to better separate their products into these tiers and really clean up those efforts and really focus in, again, I feel like I've said NCAC a lot, acquisition has come up a lot, but to really focus on what are the products that are realistic for people to come in on. And then the rest of it really falls into place sort of after that initial purchase is made. The focus of this work should always be on sort of figuring out the lowest barrier to entry, which, like I said, it does take a lot of testing. It's easy to assume things about how users are going to interact with your brand. You have to get out there and test it, though. So we can take what the lipstick effect has taught us, mix that with our understanding of this new little treat culture, and create strategies which acknowledge both. I think that's really important. Again, like I said, we're going through different economic theories, we're going through different cultural critiques, but all of that is really important in crafting strategies that will help you succeed in any sort of economic situation. So if you want to chat about what your tier 1 products are versus tier 3 and get some ideas about how to start that work, you can reach out to me directly through either DTC or LinkedIn, and we can get a call on the books, which is really fun. The particular puzzle of figuring this out, of kind of mapping out your products by tiers and persona, it's really deep work that we do love at Pilot House. It doesn't happen instantly on a single audit, but like I said, having a different perspective is really important when you're doing this kind of work. If you are a brand operator or brand owner, because you just get too close to it sometimes yourself. I've seen that time and time again, where it's like, okay, this is our best selling product. This is what we're always leading with. And sometimes having someone like me who will annoyingly challenge those assumptions, really important to the long-term sustained health of your business. It's really hard to give people, I think, a singular piece of advice to help you start to formulate hypotheses around these things. So yeah, I just wanted to, I think today the goal is hopefully to call your attention to how these big theories and how the economy affects your business, but also to just give you the start of the tools to really run with it. Like I said at the top, this is also some fun, I guess, production or writing. Like I said at the top, everything is cyclical. It all comes back around. And so it's really important to acknowledge these things again when we're creating these strategies, because you want to create a strategy that is going to work both in the short term, but also, like I said, it protects the long-term value of your business when you are able to 100% feel confident in how you are acquiring new customers and how you can continue to do that across segments and personas. It is like the be-all, end-all thing that I am very excited about. I've loved working on it. And like I said, book a call if you'd like to have your own brand audited. We love talking about this stuff. It is so fun. I think I've mentioned this before. I've never done a Rubik's Cube, but to me, this is just, it's more fun. I was going to say just as fun. It's more fun than a Rubik's Cube to figure all of this out. And it really sets up long-term sustained success that kind of ebbs and flows with the cyclical nature of life and the economy. That was the episode for today. I hope you guys liked it. Like I said, feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns about how you're thinking about this with your brand right now. I will say going into Q4 is a very important time to be figuring it out. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Now is the time to start stocking the pond, and stocking the pond typically means getting NCAC down and really focusing on acquisition so that, you know, if you've got someone making a purchase in the next couple months and they love it, they're going to gift it this year, which is always the goal and the dream. So yeah, like I said, hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope it was helpful. We'll be back next week. Make sure to subscribe and drop a comment wherever you listen to your podcasts. And thanks for hanging out.